Welcome all of you. All. Fine. To this first class, right? This is, we have tried to take an initiative where the major focus is not only on knowing the information regarding this particular paper, because all the PubAd students can score very well in this paper, right? Provided they do not follow the stereotypical herd mentality. How a PubAd student can maximize his benefit in these two papers, basically, paper 2 and paper 4. So that overall benefit that one has to get from this particular optional, right? He is or she is able to do it. Otherwise, most of these students are quite concerned about the score in the optional, but they are not concerned about the use of that optional, right? For example, if an engineer is appointed as collector, right? So obviously, an engineer's perspective of solving things will be different, right? From, let's say, a normal graduate. And if he is appointed as, let's say, head of department of a particular technical, institution, then it is obvious that his inputs are necessary for the government to perform certain functions more efficiently than anyone else. Same way, when a student is studying PubAd, his contribution to the overall, or the contribution of subject to the overall preparation has to be better than, let's say, anybody studying sociology or anthropology or political science or whatever, right? So we have tried to multiply the benefits of a PubAd student, right? That is our purpose primarily. Secondly, when you are looking these topics, right, whether it is disaster management or internal security, social justice, Indian society, or for that matter, governance and polity, ethics, probity in governance, all these topics, right, from PubAd perspective, then you are able to probably write better answers, right? A neutral perspective, like for example, a person studying mathematics. Now he knows basic things about bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is bad. Bureaucracy has these features, that features, right? But he doesn't understand the sociological understanding or perspective of bureaucracy. That means how a society or a culture, right, or a kind of social behavior shapes the need or requirement for a bureaucracy. Now he doesn't understand this. Now when you're writing your case studies and you try to bring this perspective that, okay, fine, an administrator who is working in a district in northeast region, right? An administrator who is working in Orissa or somewhere working in Tamil Nadu, right? They will have to first understand that what is the socio-cultural perspective, and only then the use of authority can be done, right? Even though procedures for all these regions are same, right? There's rule of law, same rule of law, right? But how the understanding of a bureaucrat, right, has to be considering the ecology of that particular area. Now that is a problem. So many of the students coming from other backgrounds, okay, they are not able to analyze this aspect. So whenever you're answering, if your answer reflects your deep understanding of the administrative process, then it becomes better than others. But majority of the students from PubAd also are not able to use it. Why? Because obviously they are also stuck in the procedures, diagrams, structure or a design which has already been fixed by some commercialized market. So that is the idea, that we need not become purely the slaves of procedure, right? We should move beyond that and try to understand or integrate these things probably in a better or constructive behavioral manner, right? That means you must think like that, not necessarily you are made to think like that, right? So let's start our discussion. Today we'll talk about, what is it that we have to understand? Fine. Right, ethics, as you know it, GS paper 4, right? Now, how do you define? First, we'll start with a very basic understanding. Why the need for this paper? Right? All of you know that obviously governments in the world, throughout the world, right, they are focusing on something called good governance. Right? Good is something which is desirable but cannot be achieved, right? Because every time you reach that good, what you have decided today, right, the bar shifts again the moment you reach there. Fine. It's like same like living more number of years, right? The moment you live 60, you say, "Bahut ji liya." Then again, you want to live 70, you want to live 90, and like this. That is good. So good is a very flexible idea, abstract. Fine. But the important thing is whether we have to achieve good governance or we have to follow good governance. Right? These are two different things. Whether it is a means or end. Right? Both the perspectives work. End bhi hai, means bhi hai, no doubt. But globally, right? How did the idea of this ethics emerge? Now, Indian Institute of Public Administration, I'm sure if you're my student, you've heard of this, right? Now, IIPA has given a very detailed write-up, fine, regarding the need for ethics in governance and why technically this paper was introduced. Fine. They have presented a perspective, right? Let's start with something contemporary, right? AI. The rise of AI. Now, do we have to understand, do we need to know that if AI has become an important tool or AI is emerging as a dominant tool of governance, right? Will there be any need to understand its ethical aspect? And why will that be? Because we are the ones who are desiring for the use of AI, right? And somewhere we want the AI to be integrated in governance. And our idea is that AI will improve the governance, fine? So if it improves the governance, then why do we question it? Whatever you are adding into a system to improve it, then why you are questioning it? Right? Let's see. Because technology is something neutral. Now, when Elon Musk says, okay, I will take up the lots of jobs, right? He's not talking about the technology taking up the jobs, right? He's talking about the humans not being able to cope up with the technology. We are not able to, or we are not capable enough to compete with this. It is obvious, right? But technology is our instrument. It is something which we have created. It has not created us. So there will always be a dilemma. Who is powerful or who needs to control who, right? Now people are becoming godmen, right? And God created us. Now they are becoming godmen. That means they are basically challenging the God, right? Or at least undermining his authority. So every time any human action that we take, right, it will always have a dilemma. Fine? That who is more powerful? This is one of the biggest dilemma in the governance. Why I'm talking about this, I'll come to the idea. See. So like IIPA tries to analyze this idea, you have created a state, right, out of social contract. Now this is the entire perspective why we study ethics, right? It's not just about probity in governance, whatever. So you have a state which is created by you, right? We are the sovereign, as we say. State has been born out of social contract. That's a modern political thought, right? It's not of divine origin. So there is a social contract. I hope you understand what is a social contract, right? What is the obligation of the social contract? People are, but what is the obligation? The power, the, the power which has been given, the power which has been given is transitional. You are intermediary. You are not the owner of the power. You are the delegatee. You are the delegate, sorry, right? And we are the ones who are delegating it to you. So as per social contract, right, the idea is simple, that the state and whatever the instrumentalities, whatever the systems the state creates to govern us, right, all of them are somewhere deriving power from us and they are not the holders of the power. If they are not the holders of the power, right, they need to follow certain decorums while exercising this power. Now the entire debate of the good governance starts from there. Even though in 1980s the idea of good governance comes, right? But when you go back and you read a lot of other texts, for example, Mahabharat, right? There is a khand, there is a part, right, of Mahabharat called Shanti Parv. What is it about? Shanti Parv of Mahabharat. Now, see, the question that we are raising today was raised then also. Right? Shanti Parv is basically a moral and ethical analysis of good governance, dharma, and primarily the evaluation of the actions and the role played by the Yudhishthir. Being the most virtuous, right? He was the primary responsible person for whatever happened. Why will, right? It doesn't raise your curiosity. Why will a person who is so virtuous is going to play gambling? The virtuous person will never go for gambling. Why did he go for gambling?
So gambling per se is not bad.
Oh, that's fine. But I'm saying if you're virtuous, then there are some specific things, right, which will be part of your behavior. Only then you will be called virtuous. So, so this part, it discusses the various follies, the dilemma that human beings have, even the virtuous of the virtuous, right, also has something called the human error. So that is very logical that human beings are designed for error. They're not designed for perfection or virtue, they're designed for error, right? Otherwise, you would have been the most perfect being in the world. So logically, this part, Shanti Parv in Mahabharata analyzes what are the moral obligations of a king, how dharma impacts the functions and the behaviors and the actions of the kings, why people in power should be humble, why people in power should be responsive to certain things. So there's a lot of debate in this part. This can be taken as one of the important sources of the moral understanding of the role of the people in power today. Then Kautilya, right? As you know, 15 books or adhikarnas written by Kautilya in Arthashastra, right? Out of that, around 20 chapters, out of 15 books, 20 chapters dedicated to this idea itself. Corruption, fraud, embezzlement, okay, or dharma, or niti shastra, a lot of things. So many sources are there. It's not that this is only the Western countries the source, right? But what happened obviously in this modern, when I say modern, it's post Second World War era, right? In this modern era, the states which emerged, they became very powerful. Now that is the biggest issue. They became very powerful. Why they became very powerful? Because people's primary needs, right, their basic survival was dependent on the state. So a system which is providing every bit of your survival, automatically that will become powerful. And that is how the human wants and needs are satisfied. So state became the primary supplier of all the goods and services. Right? That is what we use the word monopoly, welfaristic state, right? Or the ultimate purpose of public interest. So state became too powerful. Even though the fact is that state had only derived power from us. Right? Now this created dilemma ki, okay, fine. If we have to govern better, the state needs more power. If you give more power, then automatically that will again trample upon the liberties of the citizens. So how are we going to manage this vicious cycle of power and exploitation, right? So the idea of good governance comes. But why the power is given? To govern. How to govern? In a good manner, right? So internationally, see, it was, all of you must be knowing, but internationally, the idea was that World Bank, right, talks about a report. In that report, it talks about good governance, right, and it identifies various parameters. And to support this idea, later on, a lot of other developments took place, right? For example, PubAt students might be knowing NPM, right? NPS, New Public Management, New Public Service, right? Or NPG, New Public Governance, and likewise. There were a lot of developments which took place which tried to reform the administrative systems, so that the purpose of good governance can be carried forward, right? But one thing you have to understand, that this entire idea of good governance or ethics in governance, right, it was floated by the neo-liberal ideology. This is the biggest issue. All of you might be thinking that good governance is more value-based. It is coming from moral perspective. No, but it was the idea floated by the neo-liberal ideology. All the supporters, all the people, scholars who supported the important role of state, market, and reducing the role of the state, they were the ones who created the idea of good governance or ethics in governance. Why they were doing so? So that market can flourish. Capitalism can thrive in many of these developing countries, right? But that is a conspiracy idea. Good governance was sabotaged, it was controlled, it was somewhere influenced and manipulated by the big corporates in the name of globalization, expansion of investment, technology, access to resource and labor, land, and all those things. The supporters of the capitalist model of economic growth, they promoted the idea of good governance. Because one of the primary aspect identified by World Bank for good governance was that you should have an open market, you should have a liberal market system. Fine. So you can understand how the origins have taken. We are not talking about that Mahabharata and this we are making more in reference to our context. Right? But in reality, it has nothing to do with the idea which emerged globally. Right? But yes, obviously, the multilateral institutions, big organizations, they realized over a period of time, yes, different states will have different response to globalization. Not every state, not every country will have similar reaction, will have similar consequence of globalization, right? Especially when we talk about the person Joseph Stiglitz. So Stiglitz had, or he is associated with basically a very strong anti-globalization perspective, right? Even though originally he was not. So initially he was favoring the capitalism, right? Later on he started discarding capitalism. So he was the one who became responsible for having globalization inequality index. He created that, right? And based on that, they started evaluating that, okay, how globalization has impacted different countries, different societies, right? Obviously, all of you or some of you can tell me that how India has responded to globalization. Let's say 91 to 2001, right? What is the GDP growth rate? Average. 91 to 2001. So we reap the benefit of globalization instantly. Why did we go for globalization? LPG reforms. Fine. First 3 years post globalization, our GDP growth rate was hovering between 4.6 and 5.4. Right? You can go and consult the data of the government. Right? Then after 3 years' time, obviously it took little time. They opened the economy. Right? So let's say 95 onwards. Right? It emerged somewhere around 5 to 6%. So it averaged somewhere 6.8% during this entire era. कभी 7 भी हुआ, 5.6 भी हुआ, average 6.6, 6.8 के around हुआ, right? Consequently, in the same time, population growth rate क्या था? Now, see, you want to score marks in GS, you need to have this flair, you need to have this, bent of mind that you must be able to interpret data. Otherwise, GS का क्या use है? रटना थोड़ा ना GS. If we say 91 to 2001, and 2001 2011, right? 17%, but वहाँ पे 23%, right? 91 to 2001, 23%, 2001 to 2011, 17%, decadal, that is annual it is 1.7% or 2.3%. Fine. अब 2.3 to 1.7% growth rate हो गया next decade में, fine. लेकिन GDP growth rate बढ़ गया. At least Manmohan Singh or Vajpayee's term, right, and Manmohan Singh's first term, UPA government first term, the GDP growth rate was much above the global GDP growth rate. Global was 6.2%, right? India was going from 6.7 to 7.4%. So India was higher than the even global GDP growth rate, right? But population kam ho rahi hai. Now see, obviously the state's role was diminishing. But these data help us understand as the role of the state reduces and the private sector comes, right? So growth बढ़ गया, better हो गया, right? But population decline कैसे हुआ? वो तो state की policy से हुआ होगा. That means even if we go for globalization and neoliberal reforms in many countries, right? The state and the market has to collaborate together. They are not working as state versus market. And that is where the idea of good governance or ethics in governance comes. That what is the role of the state is to facilitate the market. The more the state facilitates the market, the better it is for good governance. That idea was floated by various institutions in the world. Fine. But yes, many of these developing countries and developed countries, all of them, but many of the developing countries were suffering from the corruption. Majority of these countries suffering for corruption. And that was one primary reason that corporate lobbies, right, multilateral institutions who were spending a lot of money in these developing countries, they realized that unless we restrict, unless we check on this leakage, right, we cannot move ahead for the agenda of good governance, right? So obviously they started thinking on these lines, what should be done? So let's move this good governance to something called ethical governance. Now, ethical governance would be government's response, right, to this changing context of market system. So government needs to be ethical, only then market will flourish, right? Or let us say any alternative system will flourish only when government will be ethical. Even though government had lost power and authority, but still it was quite dominant in most of these developing countries. So वहां से idea है कि भाई ethics in governance होना चाहिए. But let's say, so they started this now. So in 2002-3, you will see that there was, and it is one of the powerful treaties in the world, that is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. अब ये 2002-3 में, right? There was a committee called Brazilian Committee, right? A committee made by Brazil, which was participating in a convention in United Nations, right? So that Brazilian committee proposed for strong anti-corruption measures globally, right? And ultimately in Mexico, right? 2003. In Mexico, this treaty or convention was signed. This United Nations Convention Against Corruption came into effect in 2005. Right? And this is the convention which mandated that most of the countries of the world, or those who are participants in this convention, right, or those who have become the party to this convention, they need to enforce strong global or strong national anti-corruption commitments. That is why you'll see that this is the phase where we come with Freedom of Information Act, right, or Right to Information Act, finally 2005. Right? This is also a phase where we started talking about civil services law. Right? The bill was proposed in the parliament, which lapsed, but we talked about having a civil services law 2007. Fine, this bill was proposed and it lapsed. Obviously, it did not. Fine. And likewise, so you'll find this is the phase. Once this convention comes into being, into force, right, many of these states started following this. Earlier to that, in USA, UK, there were certain committees formed. Justice Douglas Committee, right? Frank's Committee, this committee. A lot of committee on ethics were formed. Why they were formed? Because the basic idea was that most of the functions of the government or most of the functions of the society are suffering because of the strong corruption in government. That was the prime idea, right? So they directly correlated reducing corruption to increasing governance. You understand? So as corruption goes down, they believe good governance will increase, and that's quite obvious. So see, in India also we have started the Whistleblowers Protection Act, which is still not fully enforced, but still we went for Whistleblowers Protection Act and lot of other things, as you know, right? Second ARC has recommended. ठीक है, अब उसमें बहुत सारे aspects आ गए. इसके one of the direct examples of this can be the integrity pacts that are followed in European countries, right? Integrity pacts between the government. इसको integrity contract भी बोलते हैं, ethical contract भी बोलते हैं, right? So integrity pacts or ethical contracts. इसमें Tata has been one of the first one to do so, right? So integrity pacts or ethical contracts were now being signed by the corporates and the government, right? Or various vendors and the government, that okay, neither we will support, promote, help indirectly, directly the corruption or bribery in our processes. So they make a disclaimer. They sign an affidavit, they sign a contract. The moment it happens or something like this happens, the contract is annulled. That's called integrity pacts. Now Tata is one of the first one which has associated or which has signed this treaty with the government, that in whatever government contracts, whatever government processes, right, we will get involved, right? We will not indulge in any corrupt activity. Fine. Now see, so these are various initiatives we are taking. Fine, but that's a different story. So see how and why the idea of this comes into picture. This is the basis, right? Obviously, why and how now civil servants or public services would be oriented towards ethics. How will we do it? How can we do it now? See, so it is obvious that there must be some consciousness regarding what is ethics or what is ethics in governance. There must be some consciousness. So one of the basic idea is that let us introduce this as a paper. Because if you want people to know about a scheme or a program or a policy, right, obviously what do? You use media to promote it. So for UPSC or for government, there was no other better system than UPSC to promote the idea of ethics. How the youth, 20 lakh, 30 lakh, 50 lakh youth which is preparing for the exam, how they will be oriented, how they will be made conscious of something called ethics in governance. Introduce a paper, right? At least get them or help them have the first-hand view of something called ethics in governance. As you see, ethics, integrity, aptitude, you understand? Why the ideas? That's obvious, right?
Ethics become a part of.
Which year? 13 onwards, right? So it was introduced as a paper. Obviously, before that, GS did not have 4 papers; it had 2 papers till 2009-10, right? But see why it was done. This consciousness was there since long time, but government needed also some time to introduce a reform. So this was mainly done for that paper, but this paper has become the biggest downfall for UPSC. Now see, by reading or knowing ethics, you can be conscious, right? But can you be made responsive? Can you be made responsible? Can your integrity increase by reading about integrity? It is expected that when you read about poverty, when you read about injustice, when you read about exploitation, you become little sensitive to those things, right? But it does not necessarily mean that you become like that. You can sympathize, but you may not empathize. So this has become the biggest drawback. Why? Because now aspirants are knowing about it, and like a parrot, they are speaking about it, right? Or they are writing about it, but they are not imbibing it. So in training, right, there is a very important suggestion that in training, they should have ethical exposure, not just ethics knowledge. Ethical exposure, right? That is why this government, right, it took a good initiative in 2017 that it introduced the post of assistant secretary in government, union government, right? This post assistant secretary was removed, discarded since the time of Rajiv Gandhi. There was recommendation, right, that there is no need for this additional layer of post in the government system. So they removed assistant secretary. So you have simple, the hierarchy going till the under secretary, deputy secretary, under secretary, and then you have section officers. See? So they removed it because of that reason, right? Now this government reintroduced the assistant secretary post. And what they did since 2016-17, they are mandatory, or they made it mandatory for the All India service officers, right? Or for the civil servants, you can say, to work compulsorily 3 to 6 months with the central government before getting appointed to the states or the districts in which they belong. Now, this may have obviously some connection, right, with your ethics in governance or good governance. Why this was done? So the government said, "Ki bhai, we need the All India service officers to understand the broader national goals, and they should not get stuck into this, right, the tube or the pipeline mentality." They should not have pipeline mentality. They are going to a state or a district, now they are getting obsessed with that particular district or state, or they are too interactive with the state government, and they lose the focus of the global or broader national development. Fine. So it was done also to inculcate some universal and common habits, common decision-making patterns within the bureaucrats. So it is obvious that every district has its own problem. It may have its own context. Every state has a different way of solving problems, or different culture and history, right? But there should be some common aspect. So it is basically universalizing the administrative behavior. Right? So see, governments have taken initiative, right? Paper was introduced, right? Now, obviously, we need to read this paper. But while reading this paper, we need to understand the broad context, what we have talked about. Unless we have this broad view, right? Reading this paper becomes merely a technical or factual exercise, nothing more. That means you are not able to interpret the way it should be, because you have simply started mugging the definitions right from the word go. Ethics kya hota, chahiye hota, ye hota, ye hota. But you have to understand the broader perspective of why am I studying this paper? Right? What are the global governance commitments and goals in this context, or the context in which I am reading this paper? Because you're reading a paper in Civil Services Exam. You're not just merely reading or studying a paper, right, just to qualify an MCQ exam. You have to write there. So the moment you start thinking that way, your answers will start reflecting those things, right? Let us see. So let me introduce this paper in two parts, right? This discussion will be mostly, this was the basic background. Let me break this paper into two broad categories, right? One part of this paper is theoretical. Theoretical, philosophical. Fine. इसको आप normative भी कह सकते हैं. We'll talk about what it is, right? Other part of the paper is applied, which I can also simplify as probity in governance. Fine, which includes the understanding of the practical administrative issues, fine, and this will be related to your case studies. Now, in public administration, there was a scholar called Waldo, right? Waldo, Fifner, they have extensively supported the idea of case studies, right, for administrators. Like the National Police Academy, right, or NPA, Hyderabad, right? It focuses a lot of study, lot of activities regarding case study. Right? So people who have to actually work on the field, people who have to have very strong interface with the public, they need to study, understand things through case studies, right? Case studies basically replicate the real world, right, into a particular information, right? So that is how it is. Learning is easy, right? So let's break it into two parts, right? Theoretical, philosophical, and applied part, right? This is what is your basically administrative ethics or probity in governance, right? This area mainly is deriving from the root study of public administration. This part derives from various branches of study. Okay, mainly when I say philosophy, right? As you know, philosophy is love for knowledge, right? It's primarily the source of all the knowledge is philosophy. Fine. So philosophy obviously has certain components, right? One part when we study of this entire paper, especially when you talk about values, ethics or values in human interface, attitude, aptitude, emotional intelligence, lot of other definitions, ethics, morality, and all that you study. First part, right? That basically comes from here. Now, in or taking philosophy as the source, what is the first or most important thing for us to understand? Right? Like there are various terms in the paper. Fine. So philosophy gives us the basis of understanding those terms in the context philosophy has described it or understood it. For example, if I use the word ethics and somewhere I use the word morality. Now, obviously, you know the definition, you know the description, right? You know the differences, but why sometimes I'm using this and why sometimes I'm using this? Is it so easy? It is so commonplace to use these words whenever we want. Then where should we use this? Where should we use that?
Some models could be used with personal values and
Religion? Religious morality is a term. Is it personal?
Ethics is a more general or universal value that
No. See, ethics is first. You need an academic area to explore certain things. You want to know about automobiles, you need to have mechanical engineering as an area of study. So you will develop, right, an area of study first. That where this particular substance, where this particular knowledge will be studied and developed. अब chemical engineering में तो तुम morality नहीं पढ़ोगे ना? Are you trying to say? So you need to develop an area of study that is called the ethics. One important aspect. Now, what this area of study studies? Now, that is very important. Kibe, what is the component of this study? What are the substantive concerns of the study of this area? Ab iska concern kya hai? Right? Ethics in community, morality. Correct, Pooja? What is the concern of this study now? Like I said, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, mathematics, whatever you are studying, right? Sociology, history, whatever. So you have some domain, right, which you have defined. How do you define the domain of ethics?
is it very contextual like
No, so I'm just simplifying, and this answer is very simple to answer. The question is very simple to be answered. What is the domain of the study of ethics? No, but you have to specify, you have to define something, no? You cannot simply say that knowledge is about everything. Simplify, what is? I'm asking. There must be something, no? But this is a remote. It may perform 100 functions, I don't care, right? But at least there is some name, no? This is a remote.
It's like a
Guideline. Now see, what is the domain of this study? What is the concern? Right? You have to understand it's very interesting. Right? Now, when you talk about humans, right? Humans, not plants or flora, not fauna, not animals. right? And you talk about that humans should live, right, peacefully. Humans should not get into war. There should be less conflict, less anger, less destruction, less this. Let's live together like one community. How are we going to do it? By understanding human nature, is it or not? Study of right and wrong, Tushar, is later part, right? First, fundamental thing is to understand human nature. Fine. Now that is the most basic idea on which this study starts. Well, what is the or who are these humans? Now see, our identity, our existence is at 7 levels. Starting from the micro, that is the conscience, right? The Atman, Chit, soul, there are various names for that, right? Now, starting from that micro to the macro existence. Macro, when you say, I am part of the nature, yes, I am part of this entire globe, I am part of this. So, see, you exist somewhere from intangible to tangible. See, that is your material or human existence. You have right? Now, try this is very interesting idea, right? Rather than making it boring, ethics ये है वो है क्यों ऐसे definition रटना है? Ethicos coming from Greek word, Latin word, तो बकवास. UPSC is not rewarding all that, right? So let us say it is so interesting. Now you exist from here to here, right? What impacts the world? This or this? Both, correct? And so there is a need for an area of study which is able to connect this to that, which is able to help us understand, right, the micro existence of the humans and how this micro existence affects the macro existence. So material body that is moving in the society, the material behavior that you are exhibiting in the society, family, community, government, state, bureaucracy, everywhere that you are exhibiting, right, is somewhere attached to the micro existence as well. So what is the most fundamental focus of the study of ethics is first to understand how humans think and now you'll say psychology will also study this. Yes, why not? Right? Organizational behavior will also study this. Yes, they will also study. Right? But here there is little distinction. How humans think and act. Right? Why we are understanding this here? So that we can now interpret this action, this thinking. We can interpret this into two broad parameters. What are these two broad parameters? Let's say we have made two boxes and we want the human behavior to be put into these two boxes separately. Okay, this is a kind of behavior and this is a kind of, so two broad categories developed, right? What are these two broad categories? कि भाई कुछ right है, कुछ. Now see, this is the most fundamental focus of this study. How humans think and act, right? And why we are studying this? So that we can divide this thinking, thought process and action into two broad generalizations, right and wrong. Later analysis हम बाद में करेंगे. But पहले broad categories में divide करो. Fine. Now see. So what is important? First to keep this as the fundamental basis. कि भाई this is what we are trying to study. Right? Then comes the important aspect. How to define this? अब ये भी तो important है कि भाई when I am trying to understand how humans think, I will use psychology as a tool to study. See, so psychology or psychological ethics, you understand, that comes into picture. So what is it that I'm going to study so that I know how humans think? I need to study something so that I can know it. So what will I study? To know how humans think, I will study their behavior. I will study their right behavior. We will study the cognitive process. Fine. Cognitive process. conscious and non-conscious. Right? Now, you travel through one road every day. You see a lot of shops. You don't give, much attention to that. Fine, you don't give attention, but it is getting recorded in your memory somehow. Right? So cognitive, yes, we'll talk about. Don't worry. So the moment we say that you are moving every day on this road and things are getting recorded, even though you are not conscious about it, right? Every day you see the board, right? You don't read it also, you don't, but there is a faint recollection in your mind. You're doing it every day, every day, every day, every day, every day, right? Now that is something non-conscious that you are not forcing to study or know about it or even to acquire that information. You're not forcing yourself. You're not even bothered about it. You're not even serious about it, right? But every day you are seeing it, you are witnessing it somehow, right? Unconsciously, and it gets recorded, right? Let us say, correct. Now, certain things you are forcing your brain to remember, right? Like you're studying for UPSC. So you're forcing your brain to do certain things, right? Whether that brain works or not, that's a different issue, but still you are doing it, let us say, right? And you are making a plan for it, you are recording it, you are memorizing it, you are doing a lot of means for that, right? You're conscious, deliberate, right? Non-deliberate. Now, what does it do? Now, try to understand. So, whenever we want to understand how humans think, we need to somewhere describe, we need to somewhere understand that how the human mind, right, or his entire organic existence, how that functions. Mind is everywhere. हाथ में भी mind है ना, तभी तो हाथ चल रहा है. Fine. You cannot simply say कि only one is. There is a centralized control, right? ये theory अब खत्म हो चुकी है. अब हम बोलते हैं decentralized control है body. Okay, there is not just centralized control, right? So the brain does not have monopoly over the body. So that idea has been broken now, right? So idea is that brain exists at many places. That is how the body has been wired. But it is obviously, let's say we understand how we think, right? And we try to understand that thinking somewhere comes from the learning a person does, conscious or unconscious or non-conscious. So this cognitive process is basically how we learn, how we understand, how we interpret, right? And how we use this information into our actions and behavior. See, this entire cognitive process helps us learn, right? Understand, interpret, use this information into the actions or behavior that we do. Now, see the interesting idea behind ethics. Now, why we are studying it, why people are so concerned, why globally a lot of activities, a lot of institution research, sorry, a lot of policies or programs are being made for this. Why? Because we realize if we modify, if we somewhere control, if we somewhere divert, direct this learning process, then ultimately the outcomes, the behaviors that we want, we can always introduce those behaviors. So can humans who learn, can they also unlearn the things which we don't want? Training is trying to do that. Sensitivity training is trying to do that, right? Ethical training is trying to do that. Gender responsive training is trying to do that, and a lot of other things. Can the patriarchal DNA be eliminated? Can the communal strand DNA be eliminated? Right? Caste क्या उसको eliminate किया सकता है, damp किया जा सकता है, किया सकता है अगर learning को change कर दिया. So a major part of the ethical study is concerned with how an effective learning can be introduced, how ethical learning can be introduced into the human behaviors. अब ये तो major study है. But it is the realization that yes, primarily only some changes in the behavior or some changes in the habits are not going to do it. Right? You have to focus on the cognitive process, the way you have things, imbibe things over a period of time. So here comes the importance of developing this or understanding this is called socialization. Now see, your entire part 1 of paper 1 is dealing with these things only. Cognitive evaluation theory, cognitive evaluation, conscious knowledge, morality, ethics, attitude, aptitude, value, intrinsic, extrinsic, ये क्या है सब? ये सब इससे जुड़ा हुआ है. Let us say socialization. So your cognitive process is nurtured through socialization. Right? People may born with some biological abilities, natural abilities, that's a different thing, right? But the major learning of a human being takes place in socialization process. What is socialization? That is the learning process. It can be primary or it can be secondary. The primary socialization, right, happens at informal environment. Right? So when a child undergoes through rituals, right? When a child undergoes through various sanskaras, a child undergoes through witnessing various kinds of things happening in his house, right? The biggest example is language, right? Nobody has been able to exactly find out how a child learns language, because for him, right, anything that you speak is one of the difficult or most difficult things to learn. Right? People are trained, people are taught languages, and still they don't learn it. So how does a child learns the language? You put a Gujarati child with, let's say, an Oriya maid, right? Or a Gujarati Oriya child with a Gujarati maid, right? And ask that maid or the ayah to take care of that child. The Gujarati child will learn the Oriya language. That means that is why it is called mother tongue, no? So how does a child receives? How he can be or how he is receptive enough to learn that language? It's still a mystery. Merely by staying with you stay with your friends for 5-6 years in colleges and school, you don't learn his language maybe. Cognitive abilities. So primary socialization happens when we are in informal environments. Household, community, family members, neighbors, society, informally, right? Where there is no conscious learning, you understand? That's a subconscious or non-conscious learning. He is just observing, seeing, people are speaking, doing whatever, he starts learning. Fine? But that is only one level of learning, right? When this person goes into the formal system, right? Formal systems, school, college, university, technical institutions, society. Now he's in a society as an employee, right? Or as a student, as an educator, whatever he is, he's playing a role in the society, right? So he starts learning things as per the role he's playing and probably the domain or the opportunity that role gives him in the society. That is why you see people who are sitting at the top of the power more informed. Why? They have more opportunity to know these things, right? And that is why we want them to be ethical, because they have the maximum influence in the society. Right? One doctor connects to another doctor, and he knows what are the latest medicines which are there. Right? What are the actual causes of the disease? He can understand it much better. Why? He's connected in his community. Media connected in see. So every role that we play in society, as a student or as a worker, whatever, right? It gives us the opportunity to interact with others in the same domain or interact with others in different domains. Understand? That is called secondary socialization. So majority of your values are developed here, no doubt, because that is how you have learned things, that is how you have viewed things, that is how you have understood them. Right? So your family, your mother, your father, whosoever, these members have somewhere defined these things for you. Ki beta, good kya hota hai? Beta, ye hota hai. Don't go out of the gate at night. See, the fear instilled in the women, or in general the children, arises of this idea that why I can't go out after 8. Now see, it creates a fear because you have been told to do so. Now, there is a real danger also, no problem, doubt, right? But still, you have been told to do so, so that real danger becomes more dangerous now than it is actual. See? So, this is what you have unconsciously learned, or you have been taught in a particular way, right? And then this is something which has been deliberately learned. But ultimately, right, your values, everything that you think, right, and you interpret around yourself, around the world, or your behavior that you have to do something or not do something, everything is guided by the combination of learning or cognitive ability that you develop, right? That is called. So, what is a value? The meaning, the importance, the interpretation I do of things around me. And based on that, what do? I judge. So the moment based on my learning, primary socialization, secondary socialization, right? For example, people say, don't eat non-veg. That's a very simple moral, or ethical, you can say, guideline given by many of the families, right? So don't have non-veg. Now see, the person hasn't seen anyone eating non-veg, right? Obviously, when he hasn't seen anyone doing it, or people have negatively talked about it, so he develops a kind of repulsion. Right? Repulsion, he develops, right? Maybe because he never tried it. But still, by knowing about it, he has developed a repulsion. Now, whenever he sees that particular object, right, what is his value about it? Negative, substandard, mediocre, right? Not something not acceptable, repelling, right? You understand? So that person does not prefer it, or it prefers something else over it. That is a value. Based on this preference, we all have hierarchies in life. We all have priorities in life. Based on this preference of a particular thing, or an object, or an action, or activity, whatever, a person somewhere creates a hierarchy, right? कि मेरा प्राइमरी सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट वैल्यू क्या है? मदर, right? Loving your mother is the highest value. It is the highest force. See, अब वो उसको highest कर रहा है. He's saying it's the highest. Nothing can compete with the mother, the love of the mother. Nothing can compete the commitment for the mother. There is no other value, right? Or there is no other thing that can compete with it. That means what? ये क्या है? मेरे लिए highest value है on my priority list, right? And that highest value, which is desirable, which I feel is the best, right? It becomes an important. So highest to lowest, जैसे हम रैंकिंग करते हैं तो कुछ चीजें वर्च्यू हो जाती हैं, desirable, ideal, ethical, moral, whatever, and some becomes vices. Non-desirable, substandard, discardable, whatever. See how the values shape the importance of something and non-importance of something, which obviously we categorize into virtues and vices. Right? See? So this learning, but whatever we evaluate, this all has somewhere emerged from this learning, right? And there is something called, I will add to this, right? There's something called self-learning. You have not learnt it in your family and homes. You have not learnt it in formal educational institutions. You have learned something as per your own will. This is also an important component today, right? We generally say socialization happens at 2 levels, but it's not 3 levels now. Something called self-learning. Right? People say, I am Swayambhu. You understand what is the meaning of Swayambhu? Swayambhu. Self-declared, yes. Self-arrived. Somebody who knows it all. Swayambhu. Self-taught. right? तो ये भी एक learning है, self learning. That means it is possible that a person who is living in a slum and is being taught by his mother the same good values, right? But this person who is living in the slum and is being taught the same good values by the mother or the parents doesn't pay attention to that. His primary socialization has been diminished and secondary socialization has been very strong. अब वहां पे क्या उसको पुश कर रहा है? The secondary, he is discarding the primary socialization, which obviously he should have learned unconsciously. So what is he doing? He is resisting this idea. So see, it's not necessary that people can only learn when they are taught, right? People can also learn even when they are not taught, or people can repel something which they are taught. अब इसका सबसे direct consequence है terrorism, jihadis, right? Or for that matter, whenever we say that okay, there is an ideological or ideology-based learning. When ideology comes into picture, it becomes the highest value. The moment ideology comes into picture, it becomes the highest value. And person starts discarding every learning he had for this ideological cause. Because what does ideology do? It directly impacts your cognitive ability. Right? It rewires your entire learning process. And it says that whatever you are doing, whatever you are learning, that has no role. That is not primary, right? What is primary is this idea, right? Around which your entire action and behavior should be developed. So whatever idea he was born with, whatever idea he was taught, whatever things he learned, now this terrorism or this kind of training, what they do, they change the ideological basis and they say, okay, जो इस basis पे पढ़ा था सब कुछ उसको हटा दो, अब इस basis पे पढ़ो. Understanding? This is the shifting of the values or shifting of the ideological basis. Once the ideological basis shift, right, now that person starts thinking about everything in the world, right, in that frame of reference. And he discards that frame of reference. That is why we say hardened criminals, hardened terrorists.
So the informal environment have to do anything with ideological bias.
Now, why? It has to do, no doubt. But still, there has to be something which should be taught first. So informal environment may have a lot of impact, no doubt, right? Because learning in informal environment is easy. But what this person is doing, he is discarding that learning also. So somebody who becomes like that, who is brainwashed, somebody who is forced into learning that, how does he learn it? It's very important. If you know this idea, if you understand this ethical description, right, or psychological ethical description, then you can change a lot of people from getting into that kind of activity. That is what administrators can do, police officers can do, right? Prison administration can do. They can do a lot of things. Reformative processes, right? So see, the domain of ethics mainly involves or revolves around this one part that is called theoretical, philosophical, ideological aspect, right? So obviously this aspect or this part has lot of what you can say, the conceptual things that you need to learn. If you learn these conceptual things, it will become easy for you to apply in the second part, that is probity in governance or administrative ethics. Why? Because ultimately, whatever you are learning here has to be applied to the use of power. If the application of power becomes sensitive, or people who are doing it becomes sensitive, right? If those humans are reformed in some way, then it has a larger or bigger impact in the society as such. Every social aspect might transform if that person sitting in the power is transformed. That is the core idea, right? Now see, so this part is dealing with a lot of these things, right? Now there are various ways of molding a person's mind. One, obviously by making him understand that these are the issues, these are the problems, or let's say these are the philosophical ideas behind why you are learning certain things. So obviously we start, the basic thing is that we start with definitions. We start telling people about what this is and why this is important to be known, right? So let us say I started with the idea that there is ethics and there is morality. Now see, when I'm studying these things, and I want to know these things, right? Why? Because this is something, a new vocabulary for me. I've never heard about it, right? In day-to-day interaction with my family members, society, and many other people, right? I keep listening to these terms. Be ethical, be good, be virtuous, better don't smoke, don't do this, right? Be health conscious, whatever. Everybody is trying to tell us be good in some form. तो ये हम रोज सुनते हैं, right? But logic है कि are we interpreting that into piecemeal things? कि running is good, अच्छा fine, but eating healthy is also good, fine. Then doing good is also good, being good is also good, thinking good is also. अब good क्या है? बहुत problem है. How to summarize all of that into an important idea, how to bring all of that into a domain of learning, कैसे लाया जाए? Very important, we should need to define these things first, right? So in ethics or study of ethics, right, what do you do? First thing, obviously we need to understand human behaviors and actions and we need to mold them. So first thing what we do, we try to understand these terms. This is called the meta ethics. Meta narratives or meta ethics. Why it is called meta? There are reasons for that, right? Something which is beyond physical is called meta or metaphysical, right? See, अब हम इसको क्यों पढ़ना? See, when you say ethics, so there will be a way to define it, right? Or there can be multiple ways to define it. It may be one single way, it may be multiple ways, right? Now see, so when we have to define this, then there can be a definition which is universal and there can be a definition which is contextual. Which one to choose? Now meta ethics helps us understand कि भाई यहाँ पे जो टर्म यूज हुआ है वो यूनिवर्सल कॉन्टेक्स्ट में है या यहाँ पे जो टर्म यूज हुआ है वो कॉन्टेक्चुअल एस्पेक्ट में. So this area of study of ethics helps us define things, helps us conceptually understand them, helps us understand the broadest interpretations of those terms that are possible. So what is the meaning or definition of the term ethics? How do we or what do we attribute, right, to the idea of something called ethics? Yes, abstract basis. Don't say abstract basis, but yes, the knowledge which is related to the abstractness of a particular term. How do we bring that abstractness into a particular idea? So metaethics part, it studies things, it develops philosophy. For example, when we say justice, right? Now how do you, preamble में लिखा है by justice, social, economic, political, specify किया, right? But where is the justice specification? What type of justice? That is very clear, right? But what exactly is the justice? Where it is clear? Nowhere. कहाँ पे है क्लियर? कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन कहीं बताता है कि जस्टिस क्या है? तो ये तो प्रॉब्लम है ना फिर. कौन डिफाइन करेगा? So there is a subject. There is a part of a subject which is going to define कि भाई जस्टिस क्या है. जस्टिस क्या जुडिशरी है? नहीं. राइट? जस्टिस सिर्फ एक आइडिया है? नहीं भाई. जस्टिस का इम्प्लीमेंटेशन भी हो सकता है? हाँ, हो सकता है. Right? So is it operational? Yes. Is it only ideal? No. It is ideal also, it is operational also, and there are a lot of elements that should be part of this justice. Then only there will be justice. So metaethics gives you the idea, the understanding of what are the core values, core terms, concepts, interpretation of various things that we study in ethics. So what are values? What are the intrinsic values? What are extrinsic values? What is attitude? What is aptitude? What is meta values? Right? How people get motivated? How people get inspired? So इसको कौन define करेगा कि what is this? That is meta ethics, right? And new vocabulary, ये भी इसका part है. Whatever the new terms which you are using or adding into this subject, this domain, right? So this meta ethics tries to define that also. For example, today you are talking about eco ethics, right? You talk about bioethics, right? You're talking about gender ethics. It is obvious that somebody has to define what this is exactly. And then only we can understand, okay, exactly what we have to do and how we have to understand what is happening, right? So, or nuclear ethics, this ethics, this ethics, whatever, right? So, lot of new terms are emerging, right? Then you encounter many of these ideas when you talk about practical administration. There also you need to define these terms. For example, when you say, I'm in a dilemma, you are in a dilemma whether to purchase a car so that your office going becomes simple, or to repair the house where your parents are living. Why it is a dilemma? Because resource is fixed. It's not about this is good or this is good, right? It's not about this is bad and this is good. No, it is basically the dilemma, the conflict of resource. So a person will have to choose. Fine, he will choose. He has limited resources. He cannot do both. So he has to choose. He is confronted by a choice. The choice he makes now will somewhere indicate his preference. Preference क्या है? माँ या क्या preference है? तो माँ या राजमा है, किसमें प्रेफरेंस किया जाए? तो ये फैक्ट है कि समवेयर ये आपको डिफाइन. अब एथिक्स क्या करेगा भाई? एथिक्स इज फर्स्ट टॉकिंग अबाउट कि डायलेमा है, राइट? डायलेमा, हाउ डू यू नीड टू एक्ट इन अ डायलेमा, राइट? इफ यू आर एक्टिंग इन दिस वे, देन दिस इज व्हाट यू आर. If you are acting in this way, then this is what you are. Understand? Now it can integrate, it can eliminate the dilemma. See, he buys a car, right, and gives it to his parents, right? So at least they can go out of the house, even the house needs repair, right? So they can have more liberty of leaving the house whenever they want, right? Or for that matter, he can call them to his place and say, I have bought a car for you, right? Instead of staying that house, you start or you enjoy this car here and move across Delhi, whatever you want to do. Dilemmas can be resolved, right? But then what is the right course of action, right? Nobody can define. Why? Right course of action depends upon the context, right? Whether these parents are willing, whether the parents accept the offer, right? Whether the parents are of that mindset or not, who can actually accommodate these ideas. See? So wherever we are facing dilemma, right, there some moral choices will be made and some choices will not be made, right? Some choices will be more moral than others. Now here the word moral is used. Why? Because see, it is more about, ethics is about, let's say, understanding the human nature, behavior, action, and evaluating it, right? But what is the parameter of evaluation? Now ethics says I evaluate good and bad, but who decides what is good and bad? Morality. Morality is the component, it is the basis of ethical evaluation. Ethics is the study, or it is the idea, or it is the description of how the evaluation needs to be done, right? And why to do evaluation, see? But what is the basis of that evaluation comes from what? Morality. So morality is not personal, just personal, right? Morality is not, let's say, contextual to only one particular domain, or morality is not always relative all the time, right? There are some universal parameters of morality. So see, morality gives us the knowledge, the basis on which we can define good and bad. And ethics helps us develop this entire idea that there is something good, there is something bad. But what is good, what is bad is the morality which helps us know. Fine. So when you say I don't prefer non-veg, it may be just because, right? It may be just because the preference, or you don't like the taste of that particular thing, right? But your action is visible that this person is not eating. How should I interpret it? That this person doesn't like the taste, or this person repels the idea of killing an animal and eating. Now, ethics helps us understand this entire domain. You understand? But the basis that killing an animal is not good is provided by the idea of morality. So, word morality, like we say, come from the word mores. Right? Mores are something which are community values, social values, cultural values that shape an individual's preference, right? Or his actions related to the community in which he lives. So everybody lives in some community, right? Everybody lives in some society. Everybody lives somewhere. So how what you can say, the boundary in which a person lives, how that boundary, the values, the culture, belief, faith, whatever, how that boundary shapes his actions and behavior, that is called mores. And it may include a lot of things: habit, faith, belief, right? Let us say mental thinking, right? Value system. It can shape many things. And that is how somewhere or somebody imbibes or accepts the moral values, good and bad. Now, this person goes outside that boundary to interact with some other boundary or enters into another boundary, then what will happen? His mores will come in conflict with them, or his mores will be able to associate with them more easily. It depends. Right? Now, see, when this conflict comes, then you say personal. But it's not personal, right? It may have a contextual meaning, but not personal. Personal is more, individualistic. So no doubt, see, mores are more contextual. Morality is more contextual. It is more relative in nature. But still, let's say one enters into one boundary, then another boundary, then another boundary. What happens now? Will his mores, will his moral values will be changed or not? It might be changed. But the same logic applies here, that there are some values which have become strong, which have sustained in a person for a long period of time, right? And somewhere he believes these values inspire him. He feels attached to them. He feels important because of them. He feels pride because of them. So what happens now? These values become influential in shaping his overall behavior. So they become what? They become the primary values, the guiding values. The other becomes the secondary values, the intermediary values. You understand? So I have a strong inclination for nationalism. Right? Now I don't care. This is the basis. This is the primary. This is the core value that I have. Now everything around me will be shaped by this value. My preference, my food, my habits, my clothing, whatever I say will be shaped around this. So when you say this, there is some core value, right? There is some unchanging, like something like basic structure doctrine, right? So there is something which is fixed. Now that is called morality. You understand? That is why we say it becomes personal, it's intrinsic. Yes, it is. Because everything that I interpret around me, everything that I learn now hereafter is because of this value.
Ideology is a broader term.
Ideology can shape these core values. Yes. Ideology is also a set of beliefs and values. Fine. But which is presented in a more superior manner, that's the problem. So Marxism ho, capitalism ho, communism ho, socialism ho, humanism ho, right? Whatever, right? So see, the idea is that, yes, this helps us understand various narratives, various ideas, various concepts that fall into the domain of ethics, right? Now, obviously, this will help us understand the meanings, the definitions, the concept, and makes things more easy for us, right? And its application wherever we want to apply. Then there is another part called epistemology. Can we mention social contract theory from it? Correct, Shavik, but see, let's not mix a lot of things together. Let's make it more precise as of now. Epistemology. So just like we have metaethics, We have epistemology also. What is epistemology? Now, this is also very interesting. It talks about the root knowledge, right? The very basis on which this knowledge has been developed, right? For example, now meta will help us understand what is morality, but epistemology will help us understand from where this word morality has come. What is the thinking process? What is the entire idea behind this particular concept that we are studying? Are you getting? So let's say you use a word. I'm giving a very simple example, right? You say, okay. Fine. So somebody asks you, how are you preparing for, how well are you preparing for UPSC? Okay. How did your exam go? Okay. Right? How are you? Okay. How was the food? Okay. Does every okay mean the same? No, but it is okay. नहीं? But है तो वो okay ही ना भाई. क्या वो same है? क्यों? When you are saying कि भाई when you are not feeling good, right? And somebody is pestering, your friend is just insistent upon knowing how are you, कैसा है तू, कैसी है तू, right? 10 to 20 messages, even though you're not responding. Now you get irritated, fine? And you call, अरे okay हूँ यार, okay हूँ, खत्म. You're feeling sad now, and somebody again keeps calling you, and you don't want to interact, and then they ask me, वो उसकी energy बहुत high है. Fine? ORN में प्रोटेस्ट हो रहा है, इधर चाय बट रही है, बिस्किट भी, आ जाओ जल्दी आओ जल्दी आओ जल्दी आओ, हमें खड़े होना है. Right? We need to protest now. He is high on energy, ideology, उसको अलग, right? उसको एक अलग motivation आ रखा है, right? You have a fever, you're sleeping in your house, you can't even get up to take a glass of water. Now he is telling you कि यहाँ पे बिरयानी बट रही है, जल्दी आओ जल्दी आओ जल्दी आओ. Right? Will you be motivated now to go, get up, get ready, and go there? If it was normal circumstance, you go, right? And you tell him, yeah, no, it's okay, I'm not okay. What is difference between these two? There are expressions which are associated with okay. There's a body language which is associated with okay. There is a mental construct, mental attitude, right? Mental orientation which is added with that okay. So how do we understand it? कि भाई ये okay जहां से आया होगा, right? और जिसने पहली बार बोला होगा, somebody would have spoken it for the first time, it would have come from somewhere. What would be the actual basis of this term? Are you getting this point? इसको कौन स्टडी करते हैं? फिलोसफर्स हैं, राइट? बिल्कुल. जितने भी लिंग्विस्ट्स हैं, they study, right? The nature, the makeup, the personality, the behavior, anything, character associated with various terms that we use. So every word that we speak, it somewhere reflects our emotion, mindset, psychology, behavior, and particular meaning that we want to give at that point of time. Every term that we speak. Epistemology, it helps us understand that. What is the root meaning? What is the root cause? What is the root basis of something? तो मेटा उसको डिफाइन करता है ब्रॉडेस्ट पॉसिबल सेंस में, राइट? और एपिस्टेमोलॉजी हमें हेल्प करता है कि भाई व्हाट वाज द रूट, व्हाट वाज द बेसिस बिहाइंड दिस, द रूट ऑफ समथिंग, so that we can make interpretations. For example, when do we use ethics, when do we use morality? Unless we understand the epistemology, we'll start using them interchangeably, right? That is why probably we talk about ethics comes from the root word ethikos, which means right conduct, right? Which means right living, which means something. Ethica or ethikos. It also talks about the values, right? The learnings or whatever that one person should do. See? So idea is that whenever we are looking at the terms or many other terms that we study, right? And we are not only bothered about their definition or their meaning, but we are also or we also somewhere want to know how and in what context this word has emerged. Fine. So the moment you say, somebody asks you how was your paper and you did it well and you say rocking, अब उसको rocking कैसे समझ में आएगा, क्या मतलब है? He might interpret कि भाई ये अपना सर पत्थर पे फोड़ने जा रहा है, इसका पेपर इतना खराब हुआ है, तो वो बोल सकता है भाई रॉकिंग का मतलब ये है, उसको नहीं पता. You might not know. So somebody, your villager or somebody from rural area calls you and you say awesome. कौन सा समोसा है? समोसा. तो उसको नहीं पता थी, उसको आपको you will have to tell him, no, कि भाई when I am speaking this word, वो उसके पूरे कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट से मैच करना चाहिए. That is what it helps us understand. How are we using the term conflict of interest? क्या मीनिंग है इसका, right? But क्या इसका origin है, क्या basis है भाई? Right? Or you are talking about corruption, you are using the word bribery, right? Or you want to know corruption क्या है, corruptus word कहाँ से आया भाई? गवर्नेंस का रूट क्या है, राइट? रूट तो गवर्नमेंट ही होगा, है कि नहीं? होगा नहीं तो ऑब्वियसली. सी, सो इफ वी अंडरस्टैंड दोस थिंग्स आल्सो, इट बिकम्स क्वाइट इजी फॉर अस टू यूज देम इन अ मोर फ्री और फ्लेक्सिबल मैनर व्हाइल राइटिंग द आंसर. तो एपिस्टेमोलॉजी को जानना भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, राइट? सो लॉजिकली. और तीसरा, राइट, तीसरा पार्ट है आइडियोलॉजी. और लेट मी यूज सिंपल वर्ड, exactly the word philosophy. So you understood the basic concept, root word or the basis of the word, right? Now you want to link all that and put it into a more better description. Now you want to use these terms, these concepts, right, to convey certain things. क्या बनाओगे आप क्या convey करोगे, right? एक thought, एक idea, right? कुछ prescription. So जो भी moral philosophies हैं, moral thinkers हैं, right? वो कहाँ पे आएंगे? वो यहाँ पे आएंगे. Why we are using the word moral philosophy? क्योंकि no doubt they have seen the world from their perspective. It's not the universal perspective, right? They somewhere have interpreted the world, the good and the bad in the world as per their perspective. So a lot of moral philosophers that we study as part of this. राइट, इसको हम प्योरली नॉर्मेटिव एथिक्स बोलते हैं. आई विल कम टू दैट, सिंप्लीफाइड फॉर यू, बट दिस इज प्योरली कॉल्ड नॉर्मेटिव एथिक्स. It is something we are studying so that we can have better prescription for our lives, so that we can live a virtuous life, right? अब हम पढ़ें एरिस्टोटल को, right? एरिस्टोटल, Nicomachean ethics, what is it? Right? यूडिमीनिया. तो हमने पढ़ा एरिस्टोटल को. एरिस्टोटल जो है कहीं ना कहीं अलेक्जेंडर का भी गुरु था, नहीं? ये अलेक्जेंडर द ग्रेट. टॉलेमी उसका कोलीग था. टॉलेमी इज ऑल्सो अ ग्रेट फिलोसफर, historian and philosopher both, right? And likewise, so see, when you study Aristotle, now Aristotle is talking about certain truths about human beings, about human existence, about society, certain truths which are universal, which are unchangeable. In Hindi we use the word shashwat satya, absolute, right? Which cannot be questioned, which cannot be manipulated. एब्सोल्यूट है, वो आइडियल है, राइट? सो अगर हम एरिस्टोटल को देखें, प्लेटो को देखें, और जो भी फिलोसफर्स हैं, चाणक्य को देखो, राइट, कन्फ्यूशियस को पढ़ें, फॉर दैट मैटर हम अंबेडकर को पढ़ें, गांधी को पढ़ें, एंड लाइकवाइज. सो व्हाट आर वी डूइंग? वी आर बेसिकली ट्राइंग टू नो द वर्ल्ड फ्रॉम देयर पर्सपेक्टिव. When we know the world from these different perspectives, what do we know, or what do we actually achieve? We achieve at least a part of that truth. You understand? So every philosopher, every moral thinker who has talked about certain things in life, right, or about our existence in this world, he has at least partly contributed to the knowing of that truth. अब ट्रुथ जान के एक ब्यूरोक्रेट क्या करेगा? What will he do? Yes, you can say his decision making, his cognitive ability will improve. And now he will have more basis of evaluating what is right, what is wrong. Maybe more chances of arriving at good than bad. So imagine करो तुम्हारे पास इतने सारे tools हैं that if you make them work, right, the things can be done more faster. That is the idea. So more moral philosophers, you understand them. Ultimately, what happens? It helps you make your decisions better, more predictable, more polished. Understand? So we are studying values and ideology, but what are they doing? They are making our actions more better, right? So ethics ko padhne ka one of the primary agenda is, right? Studying ethics, one of the primary agenda is also that we need to make better decisions, better choices. Ultimately, we need to become rational. Rational kya hai? Rational kya hai? Something efficient, something logical, something which correlates our action to the consequences in the best possible manner. Irrational. So if you are a collector and you want to do good, you want to promote inclusion into a particular territory, you will do some action, right? That action is associated with something called justice and inclusion. How good that action is, how rational that action is, the maximization of your goal can take place. So ultimate conclusion kya hai ethics ko padhne ka? That ultimately we want to make administrative actions more rational, more effective, more ethical, you can say. So rationality here talks about various things. Is it value rationality? That means if I want to achieve development also, right? And at the same time, I want to achieve this development with the best possible ethical and moral behavior, right? So I want development, best infrastructure मुझे चाहिए, right? लेकिन कैसे चाहिए? How do I want it? I want it in an ethical manner. I want it in a moral manner. I want it in the right manner. That means what? The rationality talks about both ideas. Value rationality, how to maximize ethical and moral value, right? And technical rationality, that is how to maximize my purpose, my technical objective or the goal which I am pursuing. That is the basis of studying, right? And obviously, to do that, it is easy to first divide the entire study into two parts. One is more related to concepts and philosophies and ideologies and basic learning. The other is more related to application. Now, this application can be divided into broad parameters. Like I said, you can divide this application into understanding the world around you, right? So when you say, okay, there is one application, politics. Politics gives us a lot of opportunities to have ethical evaluation. Ethical knowledge comes into picture when we talk about politics. Why? Because politics is the basis of probably everything else. It is the power system which guides, nurtures, controls, manipulates everything around us. So somewhere, whatever is happening around us, somewhere has been directly or indirectly impacted by politics. Then another aspect is economics, right? Social, society, cultural, right? And likewise, so you can add or you can create multiple spheres of understanding, right? And you can use now the ethical knowledge to use it. Or just administrative ethics. The moment we talk about politics, right, we start focusing on something called administration. And politics or ethics or study of ethics with respect to political system also focuses on the study of administration or study of ethics with respect to administration. अब वो वाइटल है क्योंकि एक पावर को कंट्रोल करता है, एक पावर को एक्सरसाइज करता है. So likewise, you can use this ethical or moral knowledge and principle to understand every aspect of human existence. Right? Environmental ethics. Obviously, you are trying to not understand the nature, but you are trying to understand the man-nature relationship. Everywhere that man or human, is involved. We do not evaluate the ethics of animals. We do not evaluate the ethics of machines. We do not evaluate the ethics of plants. We do not evaluate the ethics of nature. That is why when you do insurance, health insurance or life insurance, में लिखा होता है ना भाई, act of God, act of nature, which is considered to be something beyond us. हम वही तो इवैल्यूएट कर पाएंगे, राइट, जिसको हम थोड़ा कंट्रोल कर सकें, इंप्रूव कर सकें, मॉडिफाई कर सकें. So human behavior is the focus. Everything else around it is not the focus. It is believed that human beings act and react to what? Their environment, right? And that is where the importance of ethical evaluation lies. So your personal circumstances, when you will talk about the part 2 also, right? But not today. So whenever we talk about administrative ethics or probity in governance, then or next class we'll talk about it. So then I'll tell you, see, there are different types of case studies which emerge, right? Personal, like you said, right? Then social or familial level. Now social can be divided into 2 levels, familial, right, and society. That talks more about collective, right? Then emerging at the political level. The informal, see, formal, informal is a different context. No? First, to understand this, we evaluate ethical behavior and conduct at various levels, right? Individual level, family level, society level, and then the bigger collective systems, like in globalization, impact of technology, AI, robotics, right? A lot of things are there which we are now, or which has now entered into this human domain, you understand? Into our action and reaction. A lot of things have entered. So obviously now what we do, we are again categorizing the areas in the study of ethics, that how we can fit these particular developments into ethical studies. Okay, so they are called applied ethics, you understand? Pragmatic ethics. Applied or pragmatic ethics, practical ethics. So when we apply it, when we see what is happening in the world, what is the real action taking place, and then how do we use it or how do we interpret that? Very important. Negligence, disasters, tragedies, administrative errors, right? Mistakes leading to so many consequences. अब इमेजिन करो कि एक पुल है, राइट, जिस पुल में बहुत सारे पिलर्स बने हुए हैं नीचे, राइट, और उसके स्क्रूज टाइट किए हुए हैं, और द इंजीनियर और the mechanic or the machinist, he forgets, right, to tighten few screws or few bolts on that bridge. Few, there are thousands, right? बहुत सारे हैं, उसमें से few छूट गए, 2, 3. Out of 1,000, 3, there can always be error, right? Judgment error, action error, human error, intellectual error, बहुत सारे errors हो सकते हैं. It may be just negligence. He might not have recorded there are 1,000. He leaves those 2, 3 bolts loose, right? Over a span of 10 years, because of that loose bolt, what has happened? The bridge, because it is a physical structure, we cannot evaluate the conduct, ethical conduct of bridge, but we can always evaluate the ethical conduct of the person who made the bridge. Now, in 10 years' time, what has happened? Because of this loose connection, right, and the movement of the vehicles, what has happened? This, what you can say, there's a word called tribology, yeah, which studies how the machines and parts behave when pressure is applied on them. So, जब भी हम बोलते हैं एविएशन इंजीनियरिंग पढ़ते हैं, राइट, या एरोनॉटिकल इंजीनियरिंग पढ़ते हैं, तो उसमें मैकेनिकल में भी वी स्टडी समथिंग कॉल्ड ट्राइबोलॉजी, कि फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम अगर मशीन या उसके पार्ट्स पे प्रेशर पड़ता रहेगा धीरे धीरे, एंड दे आर नॉट एबल टू रिस्पॉन्ड लाइक अदर्स. सी, अदर्स आर फिक्स्ड, they are responding differently. One which is loose is responding differently. So what it is doing, it is basically now changing the reaction of the entire structure to the force. जो होना चाहिए था वो नहीं हो रहा है. फाइन, तो कुछ तो प्रॉब्लम हो. 10 years टाइम पे वो ब्रिज टूट जाता है. Who is responsible? Is it a direct responsibility only of the person who was tightening the screw? No. All the people who are supposed to monitor it, all the people who are supposed to review it, all the people who are supposed to recheck it. ये भी तो होना चाहिए था. See, so there are a lot of practical issues and problems emerge, right? And to a large extent, the ethical study helps us understand कि भाई who is liable, who should be punished. तो हम ये जानना चाहते हैं कि भाई कौन ultimately liable है किसी चीज के लिए. We cannot punish the wrong person, no? But most of the time we do. Ministers make the wrong policy, bureaucrats are punished. Scapegoating of administration, right? Scapegoating of anyone. JE is punished, right? But commissioner है, deputy commissioner है, executive engineer है, superintending engineer है, वो आराम से बैठे. Responsibility और accountability का sense ही है that we need to find out who is ultimately accountable for this, right? So there is immediate accountability and there is ultimate accountability. दोनों को review करना जरूरी. Fine. So we'll talk about it. I hope you have understood what we talked today, right? So there is obviously a lot of aspects to understand, but see, it is not a very complicated area, to be very honest. And for people who are studying PubAd, it becomes obviously quite easy over a period of time. Case study is one area which needed to be understood, right? With certain types of formats, not just one single format. Like most of the people are writing one single format, right? Kya issue hai? Who are the stakeholders? What are the problems? What are the issues, right? But you try to understand. When we'll deal with that, you'll understand every case study. Obviously, we are not going to categorize them into n numbers, right? But into certain forms. Every case study comes in a different context. Some in personal capacity, some in official capacity, some informal, some formal, some collective, some individual. Now there are certain issues where you cannot do anything individually. कुछ नहीं कर सकते तुम individually, क्या कर सकते हो? Fine. So when you say there are collective efforts and only collective actions will change things, you become just one part of that. So how your moral obligation arises there, right? Where you are directly responsible for the power and the action, how moral obligation arises there, that's very important. Case study also have certain elements of, certain laws, acts, RTI, prevention of corruption. तो ये भी एक पब एक्ट या गवर्नेंस पढ़ने वाले के लिए बहुत easy हो जाता है. You don't have to exactly know each and every law and the act, right? But you need to know basic principle. For example, rule of law versus natural justice. अगर ये पता है या procedure established by law versus natural justice, तो ये basic idea ही पता है तो you can use it. Fine. See you then. Did you understand whatever we said? Okay, see you then next class.